Hello, everybody. Welcome to Make a Thing. This lovely Friday night. It's just gonna be basically a radio show, and it's a debut of what is going to be the opening front page of the new front page of Wisteria.AI, which we're hoping to put together for next week ish. It's a little bit more detailed. It sort of centralizes a lot of the stuff that we've been doing, and maybe people will finally get a handle on what this project is. So I figured I would talk about that and talk about the art back there, and anything else that just happens to pop in my brain. The art is generated by Midjourney, and which is an AI program that you type prompts into on Discord, and it rifles through millions and millions of images and sort of creates whatever it can from your description. And it's an iterative process. So you type in, sort of like I think of this was like silhouetted nights on a foggy field with campfires burning and getting ready for battle. I think that might have been something like that. Cinematic, I may have said. And it produces like 4 sketchy versions of it. And then you pick from those, or you have them redo it entirely and come up with something new. But you pick from one of those 4, and you sort of do versions off of that, and you have it repeat it until it gets into a shape that you like. And then you up-res it step by step, and you end up here. This is like I think this is the largest scale it can go up to, but it's really, really beautiful. And I love that it feels very, it sort of feels both really detailed, but really loose at the same time. Like they can't quite put your finger on what is happening with the figures, and it's very dreamlike. And I think that's the most interesting aspect of AI art generation and what we're sort of headed into. Because actually there's a few different levels of this. One is the sort of the immediate sense of what does this do for 2 or 4 artists, and what does it mean? Because I've definitely been able to generate some really incredible looking stuff, and this is a very young AI. So I think that like in the next 2 or 3 years, you're going to end up like with completely like exactly what you want, or exactly something that you want that you didn't know that you wanted every time you try to throw out an idea. And as I am a professional artist, matte painter and concept artist, like the first, like a friend of mine said to another friend of mine that if I saw this and I were a concept artist, I'd be quaking in my boots. And I think that was my initial reaction as well. The turnaround so fast, and like you can work in any style and all this kind of stuff, and like it's pretty startling. But I think instead what it does is like, in one sense I agree. Like there's like it expands access to especially to concept art. So now like directors for film will just be able to type stuff in and sort of kick it back and forth with the computer until they end up with images that they're happy with and they want to build their lookbook out of, or their production design portfolio for whatever the project is. And so like, yeah, there are some jobs that will go away, but because you're opening it up to everybody has the ability to type words into a thing. At the same time, not everybody has taste. So like me, spend a lot of time on Midjourney just watching what people do, and there's like that's cool stuff, but it still takes like the greatest stuff is still being sort of sculpted through iteration by people who seem to have like a real a sort of a deep sense of knowledge of sensory knowledge of like the kind of art they're talking about, what they think they can pull out of it, the kind of references they want. And so it ends up being like a really quick turnaround art director position. And that's, I know ask anybody who's an art director, like that's actually a pretty rarefied skill. Especially to turn out like consistent things in a particular vibe, and because you still have to just like cut through lots of stuff that doesn't work. But knowing art history and knowing what to talk about and what to reference obviously really helps these people produce some great photos. And you can also feed your own photos in there and sort of push the imagery in the direction that you want. So I think that it definitely messes things up. It's not non-disruptive, but I don't know if it's the shock to the industry that I was originally fearing, and a lot of people still fear, of like, does it destroy artists' positions in film and comics and anything else like this? It's just a new tool to find a way to express yourself through, because like ultimately it is your taste and your sense of taste, and you're the one who's picking this stuff. So that kind of wanders into a discussion about art itself, and plenty of people have heard me talk about this stuff, but I'm just going to go on anyway. And that's where does art reside, and like, is it in the work? Is it in the artist and the artist's intention? Or is it in the person who sees the work, or a mix of everything? And for me, I always look at it as like, it's in you, whoever you are, whether you're the artist or whether you're the person who's looking at the art or whatever it is. Like, it's something that happens in you. And because you don't know what the artist is thinking or what their background is or whether they're good or bad people or anything about them whatsoever. You only have this image that is that your brain is interacting with and sort of messing around with, and it's activating symbols in your mind, and it gives you feelings and sort of mixes, matches emotions and memory and all that kind of stuff. And so something that's incredibly moving and compelling to you might not be to somebody else because they don't have your brain. Like, the emotion of it and the meaning of it is unique to you. So like, in a way, like, all art, as photorealistic as it may be, is essentially a Rorschach test. What does it evoke in you? And you are the thing that makes it beautiful. And so if you're the artist, that is true. But everything that you think and feel, as much as you can sort of encode that into the work and, like, try to dig out your own feelings and put representations of those things coherently into the image, you still can't control what people think. And like, they're going to have their own reaction. They're going to interpret it their own way, and there's just no way around that. And you can't say anything about it because ultimately you're gone. And 1,000 years from now, someone will see the image and find it beautiful, and you'll have no control over that, and they won't know anything about you. So, like, I think about something like the Winged Victory in the Louvre at the top of the staircase there. And it's one of my favorite sculptures of all time, and we don't know anything about who did it, whether it was young, old, man, woman, whatever it was, whether it was mass produced or whether it was done by a murderer or done by a saint or anything like that. Like, I do know that the first time I saw it, it blew my mind. And so that's the way I feel about images like this, because it is the beauty of it is something that affected me, and I was the one who sort of queued it up. But it could have drawn anything from what I said, like, it's going to be kind of in a ballpark. But if it wasn't something I liked, I would not have iterated it. And initially, this wasn't something I loved. I was just like, well, that's kind of interesting. I had to do it a few times, and then the more interested I got, the more it honed in on what my personal taste was, and sharpen it up. But this is all just me. It's not, the thing isn't awake and doing its own thing. I'm just reacting to it the same way I'd react to a sunset or a river or anything like that. Like, it's beautiful because I'm looking at it and I think it's beautiful. It doesn't have any beauty particles laced through it that make it great. That said, it's also been a pretty interesting week for AI, the past couple of weeks, because it's easy to say when you look at the art that streams by from Midjourney, like it really does feel like you're watching someone dream, and like these are like both incredibly specific and verging on photorealistic imagery pops up, and then there's also this vagueness about it and impressionistic flavor, even in the sharpest stuff. But this past week, Google, or the past couple of weeks, Google put someone on administrative leave, their AI testers and engineers, because he was of the opinion that their AI had become conscious, the one they were working on, called Lambda. And there are all sorts of reactions about this all over the web. And I thought it was interesting just because, Wisteria itself as a story talks about this, and we'll be getting into that material. And people that we work on about the story have very different feelings about it. For me, I don't think, there's a couple other, very sharp AI people that came out and said, that's not happening. Let's not stress about that. There are other important things to worry about with AI. And I happen to agree with them. One woman in particular said this, and it was just sort of there are much more important immediate issues to deal with AI than worrying about some fantasy in which it's conscious. That said, I think we should, I don't think this thing's awake myself, but saying definitively that it isn't awake is also impossible, because we don't know what awake is. We don't know what consciousness is, or what it means. How a bunch of vibrating molecules give rise to a point of view is still totally beyond us. That doesn't mean I believe in a crystals and unicorns version of it, in which sort of it's not spirit jelly or souls or anything like that. I think it's a completely physical process of the real world. But there's a reason why it's referred to as the hard problem, because we don't even have the first nail under the lip of the sticker to try and peel it up. And we're getting into territory where it's going to get pretty tricky to tell, whether or not something was created by a human being, and whether or not that thing has intention, and whether or not it's having an experience of its own. And I think within that question, we're sort of obligated to create a testing environment for these things and develop them in a way that if we were to later find out that it was conscious, then we will not have been treating it cruelly or having it suffer because we didn't understand that it was awake. But yeah, these things are all, this is coming at us pretty hard and fast. And like I said, Wisteria deals a lot with this stuff. And when it comes to sort of the nature of what Wisteria is and how these things are assembled and how the story comes together, stuff like Midjourney.AI sort of, not only am I using it as a tool, but it helps me think about what the interaction is in the story. And so I guess I should talk a little bit about what is, with this new website, what is it that we're doing here? I know it's sort of a tough thing to grok. We've been putting all sorts of random stuff, and I know it looks cool and we're excited about it, and there's lots of energy behind it. And but if the first thing, whenever someone really looks into all this stuff, the first major question they have is this is great, what is it? And I guess my answer is that it's the first iteration that you get back from Midjourney. Like, it's not really a thing just yet. We have an idea of what it's going to be. And we have like story in mind and all sorts of stuff like that. But the idea is to let it gel strangely. And though we have specific things in mind that we want to try and tackle and stuff like that, like, it is an experience that whenever you come to it, there's stuff to discover, and there's also stuff to watch be created and make connections between. So it's a constantly iterative, creative process on all fronts as the world clarifies itself. So the way in which we're doing that, and this is for people that have no idea what we're talking about, is the primary idea of Wisteria is based on a homebrew role-playing game that me and Gareth Hines and Wes Carroll played, that I ran. And that has to do with this kind of technology. Specifically, it's set in the future. There is a massively multiplayer online, well, online isn't the word, but for lack of a better term, game, a persistent world game that everyone partakes in, called Wisteria, and it's sort of like an analog to 1700s England. So everyone in this future setting who can afford it plays this game. And to explore that landscape, we have a show that we're producing right now. And you can go back through the other Make Things. Episode 4 has a good layout of the first episode. And episode 4 of Make a Thing has a good layout of what episode 1 of Wisteria will be. And that will tell the story from the point of view of people trying to sort of hack their way into Wisteria because they can't initially, because they just can't afford it. Like, there's a very haves and have-nots situation, right? The idea of being able to sort of tap into that data stream so you can experience stuff that is, beyond your pay grade, and spread it to people who would normally never have the ability to partake in it. Because in this future, like, the artificial world dominates, media conversation, and it also, dominates the scene visually. Like, or if you're poor, like, you really can't. It's very difficult to access what the world looks like to rich people, and so that's an aspect of what we're trying to talk about in this. But so there's an adventure that happens in that episode to episode story. Within the production of that, there's live action stuff, which is all the futuristic stuff. And then there's also the animated half, which takes place in Wisteria, which is done in Gareth's beautiful art style that he uses for his comic work. This is partially inspired by a movie that really stuck with me when I was a kid, and a book that I love called The Last Unicorn by Peter Beagle. And I really, really love The Last Unicorn is like this weird mix of like traditional old school American animation with a sort of an anime-ish style before, far before anime was really influencing global animation the way that it is now. And it's got like sort of 70s ballads playing through it. Like, it's a little bit yacht rocky, and it's really earnest and beautiful and funny and strange. And the book is incredible as well. But it occurred to us, I'm just like, how would we do this? Like, how would this world be rendered when we can't, as filmmakers, we can't really afford to do like crazy CG. And that's when we are like, why don't we do it like The Last Unicorn? Like, it's animated, and that's how, like, in the future. And I've always thought this is like, photorealism is great, but it's not a goal unto itself. Like, stylization, you can even see this now in video games. Like, stylization, beautiful art is where it's at. Indie games follow this all the time because people have been raised now, to like they don't know that Mario, was structured out of these little pixels because, well, they know it, but like they don't think of it in terms of like the only way we could draw Mario was with these little brick pixels. They think of it rather as an art style. And so now you have games like Undertale, which are 100% 8-bit and win a Game of the Year and are beautiful and sort of morally compelling and rich stories and stuff like this. You have lots of 2D adventures that are like this. You have things like Cuphead, which look like, animations from the 30s. And so like leaning into that animated vibe, I believe that's what people will look for, when we finally get out of the technological mindset of realism is, some sort of judgment of quality, which is an artist I fight against all the time. I'm like, I paint photorealistic stuff for movies all the time. And I can tell you, I've worked on some pretty dumb movies. Like photorealism doesn't help you make good art. It's just a style. But so that is the style of the movie production or the show production that we're doing. And then we also have Make a Thing, which you're watching now, which is the making of that and of all Wisteria stuff in general. Just because it's I hope you guys find this. I know it's a giant rambling episode because it's late night and I'm just talking to a microphone. But this is as much sort of art therapy to me as it is a production diary, and it having the responsibility of having to put this out every week, whether we've gotten a lot done or whether we didn't get anything done or whatever it is, like it just keeps me in the rhythm of getting it done. And so the Make a Thing attitude is, just like, fuck it, just get something together and get it up there. It doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to make any sense. It could be an hour's worth of you rambling for no reason on art and AI and whatever, but like get it up there. And that's the psychology behind that aspect of it. Then there is also Long Live the Queen, which Wes is running. And that is a podcast that is set in the world, the science fiction portion of the show, in that it's a podcast about people obsessed with playing the game Wisteria. And in that, we are interviewing real people who really do game design and are really in some version of the business that they're being interviewed about. But they're playing characters that are fictionalized for the future. And so we encourage you to listen to this because it's really fascinating, that they are both giving real interviews about what they know best. Like Mark LeBlanc gives an awesome interview about game building and game design, but he does it in the context of being a famous game maker in the future, who works with Wisteria. And what this does is it's like the iterative process of the AI mid-journey. Like we don't, us, me, Gareth, and Wes, like we don't have control over what Mark will say. And he will add things automatically to the creative process that change the flow of the material. And as Wes asks him more questions, like it gets deeper into real answers. And then the truth of those answers, even though it's been disguised in fiction, gets webbed into the nature of the storytelling and into the story itself that we're telling of Wisteria. And so that brings us to the other aspect, which is, you see here, Wisteria.AI. There's a thing that we put up called Wisteria Tales. And Wisteria Tales is a way for you, the audience, to do the same thing, which is like, you go to Wisteria.ai and you read this story that takes place in Wisteria, in the medieval fictional landscape. You read it, and then you tweet at us at Wisteria Tales, Wisteria_Tales, what you want to have happen next in the story. And then everyone else reads your tweets, and they can either subtweet that, and add a sort of spin to it or add details. Or they can like it and whatever it is. And like the main tweet with the most likes is the one that influences the story for the next week. And then we write something that is the prompt, just like with Midjourney. That's the prompt. And we have to take what you've written and interpret it and then put out the next chapter in a way that uses and is inspired by what you asked us to be inspired by. And so the story can go in any direction that you please, and then it gets run through us. So there's control on our end because we know we type the thing and we can, control the final product no matter how weird the winning tweet is. But we also don't know exactly where it's going to go. And we get to see the world get generated iteratively week to week. And because that particular story that's happening right now takes place in the past of Wisteria as opposed to the literal game time, like things that happen in it will, by necessity affect the stories that we tell that affect the characters in the future of the setting. So I know that all this sounds really sort of complex and bizarre, but the more we do it, the more sort of naturally it flows and the smoother it comes together. And we really want to share our creative process with everybody. And we're, like everybody is treating everybody else like they are, adding prompts, and we have expectations about where it might go, but we don't fully know where it's going to go. And that's what makes it very, very exciting to us. So anyway, that's the long way around my little rambly Friday night musings on what I think is a really beautiful bit of artwork that was produced by nobody for the Wisteria new front page. That'll be, again, hopefully up in a week or two, and you can go and interact with it then. But as a little preview, this gives you a good flavor and mood for what the thing is. And if you have any questions, please hit us up in the comments. And thank you for listening to a lengthy chit chat. For the update on what is happening, we are getting back into the casting process. I know things have been going ultra slow because of work and commitments and all sorts of other stuff, but we have some folks we're going to be talking to next week. And once that's kicked off, I'm assuming things will go a bit quicker and be a little bit spicier and more fun to watch and make a thing. But we do want to also just shout out, like, if you have any interest in acting or just like if you think what we're doing is cool and you want to figure out a way to work with us on it, then hit us up. Like, hit me up in DM or in talk about it in the comments here, or write about it too at Wisteria Tales. I forgot the underscore, Wisteria_Tales, and let us know, because we really want to try and find ways to make this thing grow, because ultimately I feel like the great Wisteria experience will be 2 years down the road when this has been going on and someone digs into it who's never seen it before, and they just look at it and say, like, I can't believe the volume of stuff, all this cool, incredible material that is just there for me to dig through and dig through and dig through and dig through. It's not just the story that you can watch, it's all this other deep backstory that's been knitted together. And yeah, I think it'll be really groovy. It'll be really, really groovy. So there's way more detail to how Wisteria works as a game and all sorts of stuff like that you can pick up as we talk about it on the show and as you watch the thing come together. But that's the general overview. And if it sounds super weird, then please talk about it. We need more super weird in the world. Anyway, I hope everyone's had a very good make a thingy week, and hope the stuff you've been making is turning out excellent. And like I said, always, if you want to do your heart good, go to David Lynch's YouTube in the morning. He every morning he reads the weather, and on the weekends he gives you encouragement with your weekend projects. I'm no David Lynch, but if I can encourage people along the way or get people to make more stuff, then I'm extremely, extremely happy about it. That's all I got. Thanks for a good half an hour on the dot. Okay, so I'm going to get off now, but I'll talk to you guys next week. Make a thing if you can, and we'll talk some more. Bye-bye.